Okay, it's 5:30. We'll call the joint finance subcommittee between the city council and the school committee meeting to order. If the clerk could please call the roll.
Councilor Scott.
Here.
Councilor Dakota.
Here.
Councilor Janess. School Committee Bahu.
Here.
School Committee Conway.
Here.
School Committee Martin.
Here.
5 present.
Thank you. We also have in attendance this evening, welcome to Derek Pinto, the new Assistant Superintendent of Finance. It's nice to have you here. Not too much of the hot seat here tonight for you. Kelly Oakes, our auditor. Austin Ball, our Deputy CFO. Connor Baldwin, our CFO. And we have Superintendent of Schools, Liam Skinner. Thank you for being here. And also in attendance, we have Councilor Vesnanoon and School Committee Member Dominic Lay. And we have 2 agenda items this evening. The first one being the FY 2023 audit and management letter, Abraham's outside audit of schools that was referred to the subcommittee. And I would turn it over to CFO Baldwin to start the discussion on this. Thank you.
Great. Thank you very much, Madam Chair and Mr. Chairman Bahu. My name is Connor Baldwin, as you mentioned, and the finance team and myself have prepared a presentation. What we'll be talking about this evening is, number one, a review of the audited FY 2023 financial statements, the accompanying management letter, and then an outside directed audit by the Abrahams Group. We'll be covering that first. So, Mr. Ball. I guess first and foremost, as the chairwoman mentioned, Mr. Pinto is joining us. He's newly minted Assistant Superintendent for Finance on the schools. It's, we're going to be talking about several time periods in this meeting. So the audit is of FY 23. Mr. Pinto is joining us now. We're in FY 25. The FY 2024 audit is underway. So I'll try to keep those separate and distinct, but there'll be a little bit of overlap. So one of the things, sort of fast forward, that I wanted to mention is how far we've come in the last several months, and I do want to give credit to the superintendent of schools for the partnership, and now with Mr. Pinto on board, some of the renewed partnership that's taken place. We meet monthly, the finance team, all the finance officials, including the city auditor. This is something that Mr. Conway will recall during his time on the city council. It was a major priority. It is something that this city council has prioritized, a close partnership with the schools, and we had most recently our September finance team meeting, and Mr. Pinto did join us. So we're looking forward to a positive relationship moving forward on the finances between the city and the school side. We've been outside of these sort of regularly recurring monthly meetings. We've been meeting ad hoc with Dr. Hall and the other members of the business office in the schools prior to Mr. Pinto joining the team at the school department. So there's been a lot of cooperation, and that is sort of the theme. Although there are a lot of challenges that need to be overcome, and we'll talk about some of those things that have sort of been put forth as the roadmap for areas of concern and things to work on moving forward. So within the audit, and these are reports that came to the city council, referred here for discussion, but there's a lot of terminology that is important to understand when reviewing an audit. So there's an annual engagement commissioned by the city. We use a company called Powers & Sullivan. They have since changed their name. They're now called Markham. They were bought out by a larger audit firm. But in an audit, there's these 3 pieces every year. There's the basic financial statements that are prepared. Those are the balance sheet, the statement of net position, the city's finances per se. There are also 2 other pieces. One is the management letter, which provides commentary on internal controls. And there are sort of three categories of comments that are included in a management letter. There are management comments, number 1, which are the most sort of routine component of an engagement. There are opportunities for enhancement of controls or areas where the city needs to address certain protocols. But there are more severe comments that are known as either material weakness or a significant deficiency. And I point those out because as it relates to one area with the schools and then one with a practice that is sort of citywide that has since been ended, Those were noted as significant deficiencies by Powers and Sullivan in the FY 2023 audit, but because that year ended June 30th, 2023, we have since corrected one of those significant deficiencies, and I'll mention that in a couple of minutes. However, the audit company, Powers and Sullivan, was able to issue an unqualified opinion, which means that the statements are true and accurate, and there's no material misstatement on the city's finances. So, if you could go forward one, no, yeah. So, as it relates to FY 2023, and because we've ended FY 24, I'll include somewhat of an unaudited discussion of the results of FY 2024 for the subcommittee's background. So in FY 23, there was an increase in net position of $58.1 million. We did recently close FY 2024. Those are under audit right now. We recently had a conversation with Standard & Poor's, the rating agency, and so we had an opportunity to discuss some of those results with an outside firm. One of the things that we discuss when we're talking with rating agencies like Standard & Poor's is a lot of the positive economic development that's going on, which is a criteria of the credit rating. So a lot of the economic activity, whether it's the link development at UMass Lowell, some of the housing development, they look at that as an opportunity to expand the tax base and a positive credit factor. One of the things that Standard & Poor's does note is the good, very strong financial management under their criteria, the FMA financial management analysis, that they assign to our credit when we're issuing debt. So in FY24, the unaudited results, we have a potential increase to the fund balance of about $14 million. That is a good FY24 ending result. Our projection for a total fund balance is about $37 million. It's important to note, sometimes during the council meetings, we'll talk about free cash and fund balance, that those are separate and distinct financial items. Our policy, our reserve policy for the city is an unassigned general fund on a GAAP basis balance as of June 30 of each year equal to or greater than 10% of the next year's tax levy, and this is the important piece, a total general fund balance as of June 30 of each year equal to greater than 7% of the next year's operating revenue. And so 7% of the FY25 revenue, the total revenue is about $522.4 million. 7% of that is about $36.5 million. So our projection for FY24 of $37 million is right on target. So the city is in good financial shape as it relates to our fund balance. This is important in case there were shocks to the economy or an economic downturn. A healthy fund balance is an important component of being able to weather the storm, so to speak. And so turning back to the FY23 audit, there are some areas of financial concern that need to be highlighted for the subcommittee's attention. This is a citywide issue. These are not new items, and they're not items that are specific to Lowell. They are common to most mid or large size municipalities in Massachusetts. The two specific liabilities that are of concern are, number one, OPEB, other post-employment benefits. OPEB is the acronym for that. And number two, our pension liability. These are things that we've discussed in the past, but it's worth it bears mention again for this conversation. Our pension liability, we are on schedule to meet our the pension unfunded liability by 2037. Our OPEB liability is $615 million. Now that is a decrease year over year from FY 2022, but that is a significant number. And because of the GASB pronouncements, we do have to account for that within our statement of net position. And so it does have an impact on the financial statements. The city, and this is something that we get credit for in our credit rating, we do have an OPEB funding policy. This is something that the council has approved, and a credit to the council that there is a OPEB stabilization fund, or an OPEB trust. And every year, 5% of the free cash, this is our policy, has been appropriated into the OPEB trust. We've maintained that policy over the last several years, and we do intend, when free cash is certified this year, to propose a vote to the City Council of at least 5% of free cash. There are other ways for consideration by the subcommittee as well as the full council of addressing this. One thing is pension obligation bonds. Those are somewhat of a risky prospect and they're only favorable in certain economic conditions where rates are not where they are today. But it's something that we may come back when the market is a little bit different for discussion as a potential way to address our pension obligation. So the next slide, which is probably very difficult to read at home or here, is the statement of revenues, expenditures, and changes in fund balance. If you're able to see it, our revenues did exceed our expenses in FY23 by about $11.3 million. That is a testament to the conservative revenue estimates. Some of the areas where we've seen collection efforts in tax title, we've seen investment earnings, and we've seen similar results in FY 2024, as well as on the other side of the ledger, conservative expenditures. So turning to the management letter, this is maybe the larger part of the discussion. Some of these items that were noted on the audit for FY23, the two significant deficiencies. Number one, in school department operations, there was a specific directed audit commission that I mentioned by a group called the Abrahams Group. They have a lot of experience in the Commonwealth working with municipalities and school districts. Some of the items in that report include some payroll opportunities for efficiency in payroll, and that's something we can talk a little bit about here tonight. As the other significant deficiency being this process of writing checks to ourselves, and this is something that has happened for many years, where between the the retirement office, health insurance, the city had this process of writing itself checks, which is not an advisable process and something that was eliminated in FY 2024 by the city auditor. So we do expect that to be resolved on the FY 2024 audit. The other thing that has helped, and the support of the finance subcommittee and the council in achieving this is noteworthy. The switch to biweekly payroll. Now, that was not an easy thing to do. For many years, the city had operated on a weekly payroll basis, and switching off of that had a pretty large operational impact. But we did it. That was in, if I recall correctly, February of 2024 calendar. That has allowed the payroll office, which is under the city auditor's jurisdiction, additional time to do audits. So it's not necessarily only in a process to get the payroll warrant pulled together, reviewed, executed. There's an extra week in there, and that has allowed us to turn our attention to examining opportunities for efficiencies. So those were the two significant deficiencies. There were, you'll see on the screen here, other current comments. Number one being ARPA. We've talked in the meantime a lot about ARPA, and we do expect to fully encumber our $76 million ARPA award before the end of this calendar year. So we only have about 3 months left before the encumbrance deadline. However, this is something we're meeting about weekly with the city manager, the ARPA team, and we do fully expect to encumber our full grant award before the end of the calendar year. Another, by way of update, the cash reconciliations. We've had some staffing turnover, and some of the current treasurer, his new assistant treasurer, have made significant progress in getting towards monthly reconciliations. The city auditor in her former life as the treasurer has been very helpful in getting them to achieve that. And we're very optimistic as to our ability to complete those monthly reconciliations. So I've that's sort of the long and short of the review of the audit. I did want to leave a good amount of time for a healthy question and answer or discussion, so I'll pause there for any comments from the members of the subcommittee. Thank you very much, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Open up to anyone. Does anyone want to start or? No. So I'll start, obviously. My question right now, I guess, is around the payroll and what changes have been made, because this has been an ongoing dialogue between the schools and the city for many years. When I was on the school committee, it was part of the discussion. And I guess my question is maybe around staffing. I don't know if it's a staffing issue. There's some discussion in here about running regular munis exception reports around payroll. So I don't know, or if the auditor could answer, like, I guess just what's the disconnect? How do we resolve this, I guess is my question.
Thank you. So in my opinion, the issue, the root cause of all the payroll errors and overpaying people, I mean, the school department does a lot of hiring over the summer. There's people that leave the district, go to other districts, they do a lot of hiring. The problem is there's not an effective system in place to track who comes to work and who doesn't within the school department. So usually, I can give some, actual examples. Somebody, retires or leaves the district as of June 30th. They come back to school in September and they get overpaid. The problem is the only way we are catching these overpayments is if the honest person comes back to us and says, hey, I don't work there anymore and you've paid me. So that is the issue, which I believe everybody is working on, is just an effective system of tracking employee attendance and who comes to work, who does not come to work. The exception reports are more just to make sure, any changes within the payroll, and that was recommended by the auditor, that people that are not authorized to make changes to payrolls, to salaries, they are not doing that. So the way to do that is to run exception reports.
And you came from a treasurer's office in another location. I mean, is this something like that we should be looking at other districts? Like, how are they handling this that we're not doing? What are we not doing, I guess, in Lowell Public Schools to track payroll that other municipalities, I guess, are not experiencing this? So that would be something, I guess, that I would just ask that we look into. I'm sorry, Superintendent Skinner?
Can I make a clarification, please? When Ms. Oates talked about certain people are not being tracked coming to work, you're not referring to employees who are absent so much, you're referring to employees who weren't accounted for. Is that correct?
Yes. So it's more employees. So once you're on the payroll, I guess I'll say once an employee is hired through the school department, they're on the payroll. They're going to get paid unless, something stops. So it's more, I suppose, not current employees who are out sick. It's employees who are hired, but then don't come to the district in September or leave. It is more that.
So, yeah, I'd like to make a sort of a general statement and then talk about the payroll. The general statement is that we acknowledge that there have been significant concerns with the financial operation in the school district. Many of the concerns, including the ones listed in the Abrams report and Powers and Sullivan, have already been addressed, and all others are being addressed, including with wonderful support from the city. But specific to the point that Ms. Oates referred to, we instituted last school year a position control system that was very much lacking and caused the problems that Ms. Oates referred to. Those were real problems that did occur in the school department. Somebody was retired and continued being paid. Somebody came on board and wasn't added to payroll, this kind of thing. That's been addressed by the introduction of a position control system. And the position control system is updated by each principal each week so that we are staying current with who is actually on staff and should be paid or not.
Very good. Councilor Dakota?
Thank you, Madam Chair. First, I'd like to welcome Dr. Pinto to the city. I saw his resume and he brings a wealth of knowledge, so I'm sure he's going to do fine. Obviously, being a prior employee of the Lowell Public Schools as of July, there was quite a bit of turmoil in the department prior. I'm very satisfied with the two new hires, Dr. Skinner, that you had with Jackie Keller-Roy and Amanda DuPont. I think they're going to be huge assets to that department. They're well respected. I've worked with them for years, and I know they're going to help Dr. Pinto. One area that I do have a concern, and I did speak with Ms. Oakes about this, was payroll system. As of the last day that I worked there, when I actually passed in the payroll sheet manually, a piece of paper. So I think we need to get to the times here and start getting to a system that we don't need to do that anymore. And I know Ms. Oakes is going to be working with Dr. Hall and yourself in implementing such a system. I think it's way overdue. I think we could do that. I am happy to see that we're going to have monthly meetings. Actually, on the side, Mr. Conway and myself thought that maybe quarterly meetings with this subcommittee might be a good thing to do. And just as Dr. Pinto gets going and seeing where he may see some more efficiencies that could come about. But I really like Mr. Conway's idea of quarterly meetings. And once again, Dr. Pinto, welcome to City Lowell. Thank you.
Any other areas anyone would like to discuss? School Committee Member Conway?
Yeah, thank you very much, and I'm very pleased that we're having this meeting. I think it's extremely important. Excuse me. Just on a sidebar here, payroll problems. I can't remember when we haven't had payroll problems. They go all the way back. You know, I started here in the 70s and in the school system, and there were always problems. So needless to say, I'm very happy that we have a new leader of business area. Welcome, appreciate it. I'm sure that you're going to have a great time here. I will say that whether I was on the city council for a while and also on the school committee, and I did bring up the fact that what we needed to do is we needed to meet on a regular basis. And because I was so sick and tired, and everybody here was very tired about these bad bills and so many other issues and problems. So I think that the whole idea of, which we talked about numerous times, was to have monthly meetings. And I know that the ball has been dropped on the school side for quite a few years. And I think that I think there's changes, positive changes are going to be taking place here, so that we will have the left hand and the right hand at the same meeting in figuring out what is going on. If we have an issue, then that's the time to address it. And you have both heads. You have Connor Baldwin's been around a long time, and the city side and the school side getting together and solving these problems. You know, again, I've had the privilege to be on both sides of that fence, and I know on the city council many times I've gone to Connor Baldwin. We've talked and we've cleared up the situation. And on the school side, I remember going to Dr. Hall, still do, and I tapped into the sources with Adina Muldoon, who was on the business side, so that working together, we would come up with the answers. I don't have all the answers, but I certainly figured that, you know, let's go to the people that know more than you do and about a particular area. And I think that's what we need to do. We need to take those egos and put them away and make sure that if we have an issue, bring the issue forward so that we can solve the problem. And I think this really is a great start here, working on different ideas and different approaches to solving the problems, and having monthly meetings, and perhaps this type of meeting here with the two, both city and school together, maybe on a quarterly basis. I think it would be very helpful. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Also recognize Councilor Mercier is in attendance, and Councilor Belanger. And if we could just discuss a little bit, I guess, the next section, which is around purchasing and invoicing. I'm sorry. CFO Baldwin.
I was just wondering, Madam Chair, if I could make one more comment.
Absolutely.
So I do, and thank the members for the positive comments. I want to sort of add one more of my own more recently, and there was, I guess, two-part. One, I just want to be clear that the audit from the Abrahams Group was something that the current superintendent initiated on his own, and it was a good idea to sort of get the lay of the land and develop a roadmap of issues to address. So I want to commend him for that. Number two, one of the items within the report specific to grants was cited as an area of concern relative. Every year we have an issue towards the end of the year whereby my office, the auditor, my deputy CFO, we have to reach out to all the departments, school department being the largest of them, to request any reimbursements for grants ahead of the September 30th accrual deadline, so that when we close the year, when the auditor submits the balance sheet to the Department of Revenue, those deficits aren't counted against free cash. And that's something that's plagued the city. To Mr. Conway's point, there's been a few of these items that are sort of old chestnuts that recur year over year. I just want to note that this year we saw a significant improvement. And Mr. Pinto, after only 3 days on the job, we had our finance meeting about the grants, and I'm not sure they were able to close out every single one of them because some of these, a lot of research is needed, and some of them go back several years. But we saw a significant increase in the reimbursements ahead of the deadline, and so we expect on the balance sheet to see that deficit much smaller than what we would usually expect in these years. So kudos to the school department.
That's excellent. So just on to the next year, though, that we're talking about the, again, the purchase orders, which has been another ongoing issue for many years. And I just did want to touch one area that's from the letter from the superintendent that talks about a problem between the city IT department and the school's access to Munis. I was just, I guess if you could touch on that.
I'd be happy to. This is from the Abrahams report?
I'm sorry, it's under the findings, the second to the last page.
Page 16.
Yes. So thank you very much. And there is an underlying sort of legal background as to the reserve system ordinance, which is a city ordinance that requires that all before any purchases are made, a purchase order be issued. And this is sort of part and parcel to the bad bill issue that we've talked about here and in the full city council in the past. There's somewhat of an internal to the school department decision that would need to be made as to the decentralization of purchase orders. And on the city side, we allow departments to enter requisitions at the department level. Through a workflow, they come into City Hall. They're approved first by the department head, then depending on certain criteria as to the purchase, over a certain dollar threshold, Mr. Ball or myself, if they're capital purchases, I would approve them. And then they flow to the auditor's office and then to the procurement officer for issuance of a purchase order. One of the things that had been, I'll say, sort of more tightly controlled in the last several school administrations was a more centralization of the purchase order or requisition process for purchase orders that I think is the underlying reason for some of these access issues. And so it's sort of at the discretion of the superintendent as to how, and the business office, how they'd like to sort of decentralize if that's the will of the superintendent. But that's something we can work with them on as to permissions in the Munis system. Likely, when we find that people say that they're unable to access something in Munis, it's because the permissions are not set for them to, and that's usually a management decision. So I'm not sure if that addresses the question, but I suspect that is the underlying issue as it relates to this comment in the audit.
Thank you.
I just have one comment. To echo your response, Mr. Baldwin. Yes, Mr. Skinner did initiate this audit. And the greatest thing about it is that it came with findings, and it also came with recommendations. And before Mr. Skinner started interviewing his CFO, he was correcting issues working with your office. So we did not, as a school committee, take this lightly at all. What we did was we began to sort of develop a check and balance system to address all of these findings and all of these situations, and directing it towards our newest CFO, Dr. Pinto. So we're going in the right direction. We're very happy with what we've had on the findings and the direction that we're going. And a quarterly meeting, Mr. Conway, seems like a very nice idea. It also seems like we're all working together to go ahead and best ourselves and our economic stature in the city.
On that, I think we could move on to the next item on the agenda. Oh, I'm sorry. Superintendent Skinner.
Thank you. A number of points have been made that I'd like to reinforce. Mr. Dakota talked about payroll. Mr. Conway talked about regular meetings. These are very plain, obvious recommendations, and very much welcome that you bring them up, because, in fact, if you look at the recommendations in the Abrams report, they begin with items such as that the district CFO is responsible for budget development. That shouldn't surprise anybody. The district CFO, in plain language, needs to empower the deputy CFO and keep the deputy CFO informed. This is all within house at central office. The budget must be entered on time. This is the nature of many of the recommendations in this report. They're very, very obvious. It's actually shameful that they had to be written. So as Mr. Bahu pointed out, a majority of these recommendations have already been acted on and worked on. Each of the recommendations has been laid out, and a status report will be offered to the school committee at various points this year on ones that have been completed, ones that are in the works, and so forth. Many of them will be ones that we'll work on directly with the city. And if I might point out on payroll and Munis and so forth, we very much want to work with the city to free up the efficiencies that we can have through the technology, Munis in particular. We estimate, we're using a small fraction of the power of Munis. Mr. Dakota mentioned paper payroll sheets. In this day and age, it's not acceptable. And so we need to free up the access to Munis so that these are automated systems and there are records. We had an issue last year where someone who was missing from the payroll, one person said they put the payroll document on someone else's desk. The other person disputed that and said they didn't receive it. Well, those kinds of silly mistakes can be rooted out if it's an electronic system where everything is sort of date stamped and so on. We very much intend to follow up on these items and work collaboratively with the city on them. If I may, do you mind if I ask for Dr. Pinto to, I'm not the expert here, Dr. Pinto is, might he have a couple of minutes to give you a quick rendition of what I've said?
Oh, absolutely.
Thank you.
Dr. Pinto.
Thank you, Superintendent Skinner. Good evening, everybody. So just wanted to offer a little bit of reassurance. We certainly acknowledge the deficiencies that were fleshed out in both the audit report and the Abrahams report. And so we recognize the seriousness and the potential consequences. So we're investigating internally. We're working to flesh out those root cause or causes where it may not be as apparent, may not be as easily apparent. And we're creating a remediation plan. So we're with tasks and deadlines and people that are going to be responsible, our key stakeholders. And so we'll share that corrective action plan with you going forward. We'll certainly communicate with our auditors and with the city, and we'll be documenting actions that we're taking to address the deficiencies. Just hold up a sample of that document. So we've already started outlining just those items. And noting how we're going to remedy it and what the status is. And so that's already happening. As a matter of fact, we worked on the document today and we're scheduled to work on it again tomorrow. And so we'll look forward to sharing that with you. I certainly appreciate the relationship that we have with the city and the expertise that there is in the city finance department, so both Mr. Baldwin and Ms. Oakes and Mr. Ball. So we're looking forward to continuing to partner with them, and we'll do appreciate their patience and support as we go forward, but we certainly look forward to the increased level of communication as we work to remedy the issues. Thanks.
Thank you very much. And I would I'm sure our auditor and our CFO will work together with the school side to make sure those Munis tools, hopefully that you can, get on to that and that we make that accessible for you. So if we want to move on to the next item, or, sorry, CFO Baldwin.
Just one more quick sort of policy consideration. To your point, Madam Chair, about the purchase orders, and this is something that was noted in the report that I was able to find after I finished my response before. There is a specific recommendation here that I guess I will put before the school committee members for consideration, because I think it's a matter for that board, that the school committee raised the approval requirement for purchase of services from $5,000 to $25,000. To reduce the time it takes to get smaller contracts approved. That's a recommendation from the audit. It is my understanding that through your permission to enter process, there is a minimum requirement before things have to come before the school committee for a vote, a formal vote, which is an important control, but I think over time, and this is something we've seen on the city side as well, over time, when a policy includes a specific dollar figure, it doesn't necessarily keep up with inflation. And so if that policy isn't addressed or revisited after several years, that might be something worth consideration, not now, but by the school committee and the administration in future discussions.
Okay, thank you. We'll move on to our second item. We have a little time here. Our second agenda item is the feasibility of combining city and school services. And I will actually turn that over to the maker of the motion, Councilor Dakota.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I will preface my remarks by saying it was never my intent to eliminate jobs. Obviously, working for the school department for 20 years, you see things that maybe we could do things a little bit better. And obviously, we're already seeing that in the business department with a new director and deputy CFO and grants manager, and the dialogue between the auditor and Mr. Skinner is improving, which is exactly what I was looking for. And I'm sure Mr. Pinto in the months that come forth, we'll see some more efficiencies. And if that does turn into some consolidation of jobs, then so be it. That was actually one of the reason why I made it was because of the finance department. But I would like to see a dialogue in the near future with the city manager and the superintendent as it pertains to our custodial services. Ms. Martin, you might even remember this, and actually, Madam Chair, you might remember this, but 10 years ago, when we were going through budget cuts, we cut the deputy facilities director, and he was the person who worked the 3 to 11 shift. So for the last 10 years, we've had all of our 3 to 11 shift of custodians unsupervised. That concerns me, and how efficient are we in that department right now? When I look at the nurses are city employees. The custodians, it dumbfounds me to see that we do not allow a custodian to paint a wall in one of our classrooms. Dumbfounds me. We have to put a ticket through, we have to have DPW, have a painter go out there and paint the wall. Absolutely ridiculous. So, Mr. Skinner, with all due respect, I'd like to see you and City Manager Golden come up with a plan on this. I think this is something that's needed, and it's been needed for a while. And I think there's obviously some efficiencies that would come from it, and I welcome any of my colleagues here to chime in. Thank you very much.
I would just echo the sentiments of Councilor Dakota that there's a conversation that happens, I guess, between the city manager and the superintendent of schools. You're in the business of educating children. I'm not really sure if, custodial and facilities staff necessarily, is something that wants to be kept underneath the purview of the schools. I don't know if we necessarily make that decision. We don't. So I'd like to see the discussion continued, and I guess that was the reason just for putting it on. So I don't know if anyone else would like to speak on it. Superintendent Skinner.
But just thank you for the suggestion, Councillor Dakota and Councillor Scott. I'm happy to say I've got very good and collaborative relations with the city manager. I meet with him periodically. I meet with him very soon, and I have taken note of the comments and will add it to our agenda. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else that would like to speak? No? So it'd be the only items on the agenda, so I guess I would call the meeting to a
Motion to adjourn?
motion to adjourn by Councilor Dakota, seconded by School Committee Member Bahu. Sorry, I'm not used to saying school committee member during a city council meeting. Meeting adjourned.